In this video, we're going to be taking a look at building some of these shapes that you see here on the belt buckle and some of the shapes that you see here on this buckle part right in there. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to just hide this build group that I have right now and just hide the geometry because I'm going to be working off of this front image plane that we see here. So it's going to go to the front view, and I'm going to go ahead and say create polygon primitives and use a cylinder. I'll do the option box for that. And let me pull that window in. I'm going to create it going down the z-axis. And the reason for that is if we take a look here and look at this little manipulator and turn on our grid, you can see that z runs down this plane. So if we create it this way, we can go ahead and hit apply, and you can see it's going to build that cylinder like this for us. I don't want it as thick as it is, so we can take the height and maybe put that down to something like 4 or something like that. And maybe you'll do the axis divisions to 16. So let's go back to that front view, and we'll push this into place by moving it with the move tool. Double click on there, and I'm moving in world space. So let's push this right up in here, just like that. And then we'll go to our side view. Let's scale it up just a little bit. So go to our side view and get it set up there as well. So we can bring everything back just to take a look at what's this thing look like. And it needs to be right around in here, like that for us. Maybe somewhere right in there. That'll be fine. Okay, and then the other part of that is taking a look at this shape. We'll make a duplicate of this. Control D, and we'll scale this one down. This time we could scale this thing uniformly like this down and then scale it out this way to scale the width. But if I want to scale 2 axes at the same time, I can go ahead and let's just move this thing out like this, and I'll put it on the scale tool. And if you hold down Control and click on this manipulator box here, it'll scale both those directions at the same time and leave the width the same, and that could come in handy for you. So I'm going to take this and move it back in through here and just try to roughly get it the right size for what we need it. Something around there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And I think the amount of polys that we have going around this thing is pretty high, so if we hit F10 for our edges, I have soft select turned on. I'll just tap B to turn that off. I can select every other edge here, like this, and I'll get rid of it. So I'll just hit backspace on there, and then hit F9 and drag a marquee around there, and then just hit that. And then now we should have this piece of geometry like you see here. So I know that it's pretty thick right now, but we need another part to this where we need to have a different piece on here. So you can see we've got the round piece, and then we've got this other piece that's kind of got this pattern, and then this thing sits over the top of it. So if we maybe take this cylinder and thin it up just a little bit, and then we duplicate it, Control D, and then move that thing forward like this. And maybe we'll take this one and scale it down just a little bit so you see the other portion of it. So we've got that, and I'm going to take the multi-cut tool and then drag a cut down through the center of this thing, because I really only want to build half of it. And I'll tap 4 to see my wireframe. This way I can just drag from the back of this thing like that. And I've basically split the object in half at that point. So I'll tap 5 to bring back my shading, tap F11 for faces, and then drag over the top of this. I'll tap 4 just to see and make sure I've got just the pieces selected that I want. So I'll tap 5. Let me hit undo real quick. I lost my selection on there. So I'll just hit backspace. So here we are with this shape, and now we can start cutting into this thing. And actually, just because I don't want to deal with having to make this shape twice and do it on the back side, I'm just going to take this entire backside of this thing, all the faces on it, like that, and then I'm going to hit backspace and get rid of it. So let's go to the front now, and then now with the multi-cut tool, let's just go ahead and use the multi-cut tool, and I'll come here like this, and we'll do something like this. I'm just trying to figure out like what edges I could kind of pull from to make this thing look the way that I want it to look. It does feel like, I know we've got this drawing here, and the drawing isn't quite centered up, so I'm trying to retain as much as I can of the drawing, but might not give me the best results to follow that thing exactly. I'm trying to build something more like this, where I could take this face, delete this thing away. Now if I take the verts, push this thing back, and I'll hold down V while I move it back so it snaps right to the other surface on there, and then maybe pull it forward just a little bit. And now I can take this whole shape, the faces of it, F11, and then I'll shift right click and extrude the face out and give it a thickness. Maybe something like that. And now I don't need this part of it because I'm going to mirror this thing across. But before I mirror it across, I might as well do this. I forgot I should probably do this before I extrude it out. So let's clean up the geometry on this thing just a little bit. We'll use the multi-cut tool like this, and we'll drag across here like that. And we're just going to build a pattern going around this thing. And I'm trying to think how we could build this thing out and still have, you know, not very many polys for this thing. So if I go here like this, tap G, I could probably go like here and here. And I know it doesn't look all that pretty, but should still give us the functionality I think we need. I'll just go here like that. And then we have an N-gon here, so we'll just go drag it across here like that. And then now, because I did that on the back side of this thing, I can select my faces for this thing, or just drag a marquee around it. And then now I'll extrude that. And because I did that work on the back side, I should be able to push this forward like this and then get rid of these pieces. Now it is shading oddly because I need to reverse the normals on that. Whenever I did that operation, I knew it was reversing the direction of that. I deleted the history real quick, Alt-Shift-D, and then now to reverse the normals on here, we can go to normals and just say reverse, and you can see it's going to draw correctly at that point. So now we need to zero everything out like this. So we can leave the translation here, but the scale, let's get rid of that information. So we can go to modify freeze transformations, and then just freeze the scale like that and zero that thing out. And then now we can mirror this thing across. So we could just give it a duplicate. So I just duplicated that thing, Control D. You see I've got 2 copies of this. I can give it a negative scale. Normally we do that with a negative instance, but since we know we're just going to combine these 2 things together, we can just do a duplicate. So I'll just take this and I'll say Mesh Combine like that, and I'll hit Alt-Shift-D to delete the history on it like that. And now we want to join this thing together. If we tap 3 for the smooth mesh preview, you see how it's got this kind of hard edge going through here. It's because we need to take our verts and actually weld them together. If we selected one of these verts and moved it, you can see it's not actually welded together. So I'm just going to drag a marquee through this whole thing, and then shift right click and say merge vertices, and I'm going to do merge vertices option box and give it a really small value and have this thing turned off. So I'll hit apply, and you should see that thing turn and move away from that hard edge to, it's going to smooth that thing out like what we're looking for. If you just want to check it, you can select one of these verts and pull it around, and you can see it's all welded up together at that point. So let's tap 1 for that, and we've got that shape there, like that. Everything should be good for that. Now, taking a look at this thing a little bit further, we need some kind of little circular piece down here, and then we need these little kind of like wing-like structures down here. And it does feel like this stuff should be brought in a bit. So I'm going to go here real quick. You see, whenever we combine this thing together, the pivot point is set down at the world whenever you combine objects. That's fine, but I want to go modify center pivot, and I'll actually take the pivot point and put it right in the middle of that thing. So that could come in handy for me. So I'm going to take all these pieces and just move them back ever so slightly, like this. I don't care if it intersects with this too much. It's okay. Like that. And we'll go to the front, and I'm going to make these shapes that you see here. So we'll just go to the mesh tools, and we'll say create polygon tool. And then this time I can just use this kind of like a drawing tool. Like this, and make these points. And again, this thing isn't too high res. That's fine. And then to save myself some trouble, I'll just go ahead and say Shift, right click and multi-cut tool, and then I'll drag across here, tapping G for my last command, or you can hit enter to finish that tool out. So we'll go something like this, go across here, and I think we should be good for that. Now I can maybe readjust just some of these points just a little bit after I have everything drawn out and I know more about what I'm working with here. I just hit undo there. I accidentally deselected off this and selected another piece. So that's a nice thing about the undo key, is that you don't have to worry too much about losing your selection or whatever it is that you're working on. You can usually get back to it fairly easy. And if this looks too chunky in here, we can use that multi-cut tool. So hit F8 and then shift right click multi-cut tool. And I can just hold down Control and drag and then click and make a new loop here like that. And now I'll just hit Q and put on my move tool just to get out of that multi-cut tool, and then finesse these just a little bit more. The other thing you can do when you're doing curvature, I know there's a curve here, but it takes less points to actually make that curvature, and it takes more on the outer parts. So like, it is possible that you could merge these verts right in here and here, and you can see it's not going to take as many points to make that curvature and through here. It is looking a bit chunky, but if you have a case like that where you've got a bunch of curvature on the outer edge, you could do that. But I'm just going to undo that. I just want to show you for demonstration purposes that is possible. The other thing is I've got, this is a triangle. I could make this a quad by just going to the multi-cut tool and adding 1 point and hitting enter. And then now if I move that point, we can start to build something that feels a little bit more rounded and not so hard-edged, like that. And then let's just go ahead and take this thing and move it forward till it hits maybe about right there. And you can already see the because I have ambient occlusion, screen space ambient occlusion turned on, and it's not drawing so great for me, I think I'm going to want to reverse the direction. We can do it now or we can do it later. In the earlier part we did it after the fact, and we've got some history on here. I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-D to delete history, and so I can go to normals and say reverse, and you can see it's going to fix that drawing problem that we have here. And I'm going to hit F11 for my faces, select them all, shift right click and extrude face, and then just move this forward, something kind of like this, and hit F8, and you can see we've got this here now. And then we can duplicate this. I'm going to hit Control D give it a negative scale, an X, and then I'll just take these two and I'll join them together just like we did before with the mesh combine. Delete the history on it. We don't need this empty transform thing that gets left over from the combining, so let's delete that away. And now we could go also and say modify center pivot, and we've got our pivot point in the center of that thing. So we're starting to build that thing up. Trying to see from this drawing if it would really be worth it to build this little tiny piece here. I do know, like, from the drawing, it's actually supposed to have a little bit of a different shape right here. Like if we look at this and pulled it up just a little bit, you can see if I hit F9 right in here, it's really supposed to have something a little bit more like this kind of shape that you see going on here. Like I was saying, it's a bit off-centered for things. This is maybe a bit too large here, so that might have to be scaled down just a little bit. So if we tap 5, and you can actually see what this thing is looking like at that point. And now we can see, since we've raised these things up, we can see maybe a little bit more of this. So maybe we'll take these points, pull this thing down and scale them in like this. Like you see here. So let's pull that in. You can see because it's intersecting with this geometry, we can get away with not having that geometry go all the way across there. So it's not a big deal, but it's just something to take into consideration. Okay, so I think that's starting to look pretty good. Now, if we want to be really conservative with things, we really don't need the back side face of this. Like so, this thing is never going to be seen, so we can just get rid of it. The back side of this, probably never going to see like these faces here, and never really going to see any part of the back of this. So if I selected all these faces back here, and I know let me try to do this a little better. So if I just went to the side and drag a marquee around here like that, and then hold down Control and deselect that, I could select those pretty easily and hit backspace. And I just got rid of the entire back side of that thing. Now, at certain angles, you can't see the back of this and this one, so probably makes sense to leave that, but it would take quite a bit to get a camera this close to this object to notice like that there's nothing in there. So I'm not too worried that that would ever happen. So let's see here. We can go to shading, flat shade on, get an idea of what this thing's looking like, and tap 7 for our lighting, turn our grid off. So I think that's working fairly well. Now what we could do is, since we have this built along with this, it's kind of a very similar shape to what we need right up in here. So we could duplicate these things, just hit Control D. And I'm going to move this off to the side real quick. Now I don't want this bottom half to look the way that it does. So we need to duplicate this, and we'll rotate it. If I hold down J, I can turn on snapping for rotation. So let's rotate it 180 in this direction, and we'll get these things back to the center. So let's go translate X, put that down to 0, and then let's take this top part and this bottom part and combine it like that. Delete the history on it, and I'll do center of the pivot again. just going to move it out to the side. I just wanted to make sure before I join it together. If you join it over here, it puts that pivot point down here in the origin of the world, and that will kind of screw things up. So I'm just going to go F9 like this, and shift right click, go to merge vertices, and that option box thing. Normally we want these things to be sitting directly over the top of each other, but we could steal the functionality of this and see if we can get this thing to merge these points. Let's see if I get this pretty large like this. Let's do 1. And you can see the distance, the threshold. I want it large enough that it bridges this gap, but I don't want it so big for that tolerance that it's going to merge all these points together. Because 1 will do this. Let me hit undo real quick. And if I had like 5, see how it joins everything together? So that's way too big. 2 joins everything together, still pretty good, but that distance isn't enough to join these together. If we go with 3, see how it merged those points there? So it's just, this is that threshold for it. So it looks like we could go all the way to 2 and we'll be fine for that. So I just want to get that there, and then we'll delete the history on that, Alt-Shift-D. We've got this piece here. Let's put this back to 0 for X. And then now we got this cylinder and this thing together. Let's push this over here. And it looks like from the drawing here that this has really been kind of squished this way, kind of like that. And that these points in the center of this thing need to come in quite a bit. But I'm going to hold on, tap B to turn on soft select, and then hold down B and click and drag out. And do a little bit of soft selection around this thing, kind of like that. I'm going to grab these points along with these. So I just drag here and hold down Control Shift and drag over here. And now I can scale this up a bit, but I'm going to decrease that soft select. I don't want it to move these outer pieces, so maybe I should just turn it off altogether. And then do something kind of like that. I think that'll work. And so now let's try to take these, we'll actually combine these together. So let's put this back to 0 here, and then we'll combine them together. So we'll do Mesh Combine, delete the history, Alt-Shift-D, and then modify Center Pivot. And now we can move this thing together as if it's one object. Is probably more like what we want. So I'm going to try to use the drawing here and get it pushed into place. So I'm going to move it, rotate it, like that, and maybe scale it down. Now I am working in object space here. So remember, if we scale in world, we're not going to be able to scale this length here like what we're doing, but if we do an object, we can go ahead and do that and not have to worry about things. So we're getting there. Now this angle needs to be matched a little bit better on this. And let's scale this thing down again. Move it slightly. I think it's starting to look pretty good. Like that. And I do wish there was a little bit more geometry through here. It's possible that we could do that. We even have triangles here, so we could turn those into quads. So I could go like Shift, right click, multi-cut tool, and drag along this edge and hold down Shift, and it'll snap to 50-degree increments here, and then hold down Shift like that, and do this here, same thing here. Let's try this again, just to make sure it's snapping along here. It's getting a little bit confused, so let's hit enter. I'll go here. So because it was getting confused, I just made a point first and then drug it along here, and for whatever reason I could snap across this thing a little bit better. So here we go. So why I added those splits was now we can take these edges, here, here, and here, and I can scale just in this direction, kind of like this. And it's going to build that roundness, and I can scale up this way a little bit if I wanted these to feel a little bit more rounded. Now this feels a bit odd to me, these edges that we have here. So what we can do is just redraw those with the multi-cut tool, and then go from here to maybe here. Like this, and then we'll need to do something with these. There's probably more efficient ways to finish this out, but just for now I'm really more concerned about the just the shape of things and if that's working. So I just deleted history, Alt-Shift-D in object mode for that. And I think that looks pretty cool. Now it is possible that we could completely and totally make these bolt things in texture. Now it would be flat and there's not going to be any kind of change in silhouette, but let's select our whole model and we can take a look at the tries. So we're above 5,000 tries now, which I still think we're doing pretty good. I don't want to go any higher than maybe 6,000. I want to keep it right around there. So I think we're okay right now if we wanted to do something like this. So I'm going to show you, we're going to go create polygon primitives and just make a cube like what we've been doing. This time I'm going to move it up so we can see this thing. I don't want any divisions in it, so I just want a cube, and I'll tap 3 for smooth mesh preview. So I'll select it and I'll go modify, convert smooth mesh preview to polygons. So again, that's modify, convert smooth mesh preview to polygons. And now we're going to take that cube that we hit 3 for smoothing and turn it into a sphere, and now we're going to turn that into actual geometry. Now the geometry is pretty darn high for some little tiny bolts like that. We'll go take this divisions down to 1, and we've got something like this. And now we'll delete the back side of it. So we'll take all those faces here in backspace, and then we'll take this and we'll move them into position, scale it down, something like this. I can take this and move it. And as I get closer to this belt buckle, I need to rotate it to match the orientation better. And I'll just have it lightly intersect with this thing. So you can see, we can tell the poly count of just creating just that bolt thing that we made, and that thing's got 24 tries. So if we delete it or duplicate it, Control D and move that, total cost of that's going to be 48 tries for us. So as you start to become really concerned about your poly count, just keep these things in mind. Is this little detail worth the budget that you have to spend for that thing? And I still want to be building out. I'm going to build an eyeball for this and some eyelids around here, and just kind of finesse. I really want the head to feel really nice, and we do have some things to add geometry wise to the arms to make some folds, and same things for the legs. So I know we're doing this right now, but we might end up scrapping this. But there's going to be some material coming later on that we talk about how you can take actual 3D geometry and you bake that information down into a texture. So just because we're modeling this stuff now, and if it's too high, it might be possible. I know we got to make the texture for it, so we might be able to steal some of the shading for this thing and actually use that for our texture on this belt that we have going on here. So I think that's getting pretty close. let me just make sure I'm moving an object space kind of like that. And if I tap 3 for this, you can see what a smooth version of this will look like. And so that can kind of give you a preview of what that might look like if this was just baked as a texture down to here. That's the kind of shading that you can get. Now the whole benefit of having the geometry is you actually get silhouette breakup. So whenever you look at it from different angles, you can actually see that thing like this. So I think we're pretty good on this stage, and this is roughing the thing out. There's been something that's really been kind of bugging me for a while about the head though, and that's the fact that we have this fin kind of structure that's just left over here with an open part to it. So I did want to take this and extrude the edge on this and then pull it across kind of like this, and then take this point, snap it to here, and then merge the vertices for that. And then take this point here, hold on X, and we need to be in world movement. Hold on X, and then snap, and accidentally get this grid thing turned on. So hold on X and snap here. Let's see, and I need this point here, and hold on X and snap to the center here, like that. And then now I've got these extra points, and I can kind of pull them down like this, and maybe change this just a little bit. Let's take a look at this thing. And I know it's not much, but it does make me feel a little bit better about the shape that I've created. So I'm going to pull this up just a little bit, and I'm going to hit F8, and I'm going to shift right click and use the append to polygon tool. So we're in object mode, shift right click, and then just use this append to polygon tool and click across here like that, and get this extra little tiny piece that kind of tucks in under there. So tap 5 for that, delete the history on it, do the smooth shading for this. So I'll just go normal, soften edge. And looks like we're pretty good here. I'm going to go flat shade all, tap 7 for my lights, and we're starting to get something that's looks pretty good. And through there, I'll delete the history on everything. If I find anything that's got history that needs to be deleted, like this. Just going through and selecting some of the pieces and just checking to make sure I don't have any of that built up. Now, I could take these things and pull them all together, but I could just select the pieces like this and hit Control G and call this belt design or something to that effect. I had caps locks on. And I can put that in my build temp group. And then I've got this thing here. And then these are this is bolt 01. I do think it is important to keep your stuff organized, and like I said, at any point, let's say you got sick or something like that and you had to hand this work off to somebody, that they could pick this thing up and start working with it. So this is chest belt design, that, and then now we've got everything together in that group, and we can start to see that with everything we've got, it's showing that we're over 6,000, we're getting close to 7,000 tries. So I think we definitely need to start being a bit more careful. And it was kind of weird that something in here, I've got another head and another eye thing in there, and so that's what's driving that up. So okay, I'm starting to get a little concerned, but if I drag a marquee over this, this is all that's in the viewport that's visible, and this is 5,338 tries. Like I said, I have this build group temp, and within there is another head that I have, an older one that I was saving. I'll hide that, and I also have some eyes that we'll be taking a look at for another section for building those up and stuff like that. So that's where that number comes from. So we're at a little over 5,000, and we've got enough room, I think, to start finessing the eyeballs and the eye ridge and things like that. Starting to build a little bit of cuts for the arm, for the pillowing effect here, and then also on the pants as well. So I think we're doing pretty good, and we're going to save this as another version. Let's just check our other views real quick, make sure everything's kind of shored up on this. That looks pretty good. And so I'll go File, Save Scene As, and this will be Pirate Model, and I'll do _16 for this model.